Now, Jake, if
Yep.
if somebody that don't know what they're doing comes up and looks at this, okay, you got a solid mat, grass mat, hydrilla, but if you look over here, you got a couple blowholes. Can you show everybody at home how to work a frog? What do you do when you're coming over the solid mat to the blowhole? What do you do with that frog once it hits that blowhole?
Well, once if you spot a blowhole out here, Cliff, what's going to happen is you're going to want to cast. Make sure you cast past the blowhole at least 5 or 6 feet. If you land on the blowhole, tendency those fish will stick around that blowhole, and if you land on it, you'll spook them. It's sort of like throwing a jig at a dock, and you know they're on the outside post. You want to make sure you're back up underneath it 3 or 4 feet instead of landing on top of them. So the same concept here. You spot a blowhole, cast past it 6, 7, 8 feet, and work it up to the hole. And that way, once it hits the hole, hopefully by that time, since you're gonna, if it's real thick, you're gonna be popping your rod down. That fish will start easing up there, looking what's coming across there, trying to figure out, hey, is that a, is it a frog up there, or is it something I'm gonna eat? And they're gonna ease up there, and then when you hit that blowhole, they're right there on it.
So what do you do when you're bringing a frog up? Do you pause it at the
I'm going to pause it at the hole. If I don't get hit before I get to that hole by that fish, I'm going to pause it right in that hole or right alongside of it and just leave it sit there for a few minutes and barely twitch into that rod and make that grass just move a little bit to give that fish, he may be trying to take aim on it. It could be thicker underneath there than what we think, and he might be having a hard time to get through there. So you're going to pause it and just barely twitch it a little bit, make sure it's not there, and then pop it a couple times and leave it sit and maybe do the same thing to see if you've drawn that fish up there.
So when you get on the other side of the blowhole, that's when you start pounding the mat again?
You start pounding the mat again, but you don't want to do it too fast because chances are, like I said, that fish is right around that blowhole somewhere, usually within a 4 or 5 foot radius. And the other thing, a lot of guys, they'll catch a fish and they'll be like, oh, I got that fish out of there. I couldn't tell you how many times, once we've got a fish out of an area, throw it right back in there.
Yeah.
Chances are there's 2 or 3 fish in there. I've caught up to 5 fish out of the same little area the size of a boat. And we do it all the time when we're punching. If you think about down Florida or up here on Gunnersville or any area of the grass lakes, we do a lot of punching. And you always hear guys say, man, I went 100 yards. All of a sudden I got 1 and I got 3. Okay. Same thing applies to frog fishing. If you get 1 out of an area, chances are there's another one, maybe 2, 3, 4, or 5 in there.
Right.
So make sure you work that area completely. But back to that blowhole, yeah, you're going to want to stop it right in that blowhole or right next to it and just barely twitch it, trying to get their attention up there to eat that frog.
Right. And I learned that yesterday because it was Jake and Tony versus me and Big Stick from South Carolina, Brian Miller. And we went all day with not a hit. And
I'm not going to tell y'all who caught the 6, and it wasn't me.
Yeah, we're not going to tell you.
It was a little lady over in the other boat today, and I'm about to change up partners again.
And she never frog fished a day in her life, and she bagged a 6 something. And we got that posted to the Facebook. We're going to have it to the website coming up. But yeah, we wasn't but 50 yards from Jake and the girl, Tony. And we was watching them put fish in the boat right and left, and we were just snake bit. But anyhow, another question, Jake, is you got this thick mat.
Yep.
But then you got this wide open area over here. So that gives you a defined edge all the way. So now, would you go out into that open and cast into the mat and bring it over? Or do you cast out in the open and then bring it into the mat?
It depends upon how you're approaching it. Now, we got out in the middle of this mat and we're approaching it now from here. So I'm going to cast out there and work it. And then when we go down, I'm going to obviously go down the open area. And what that is a ditch out there, Cliff. So we're going to work our way down that ditch a little bit. So we're going to be casting back into the heavy stuff and bringing it out. And when you get to that edge, that's another good place just to stop and leave it sit for a couple of seconds. Because a lot of times those fish will follow it out. If they're within 4 or 5 feet of the edge of that grass, they'll follow out right to the edge of the grass. And the minute it hits that open water, they'll crush it.
So you get most of your strikes right on the edge of that?
No, it's about 50-50, but I'm just saying that's a good place to stop and leave it sit for just a second and just barely twitch it.
Right.
Because they could have pulled out of that grass and just sitting there watching it. And if you've ever been around down to Bass Pro Shops at some of the, down at fish tanks and watching any demonstrations, those big fish, will, when they see that bait drop in there, they'll shoot up to it and they'll sit there. And they'll watch it and they'll move around it and you twitch it and they'll move at it a little bit, twitch it again. It might take you 3 or 4 times to twitching that worm or that bait to get them to actually pick it up.
All right.
You know, and that's a lot of stuff, you know, new anglers and even seasoned anglers forget about is these big fish, a lot of times they're weary. They didn't get that big being stupid. They're going to sit there and watch it for a minute and they're going to, you know, dart at it a little bit to try and get it to move to make sure it's real. So that's where that twitching comes into play on every now and then.
Right. Now, if you bring clients out here that never frog fished a day in their life,
Yep.
what would you teach them? This morning, it's cloudy, no wind. Now, we got the thick mat, we got the thin mat, we got the thin stuff with the isolated. What would you tell them to target? What would be the first thing you would teach them?
First thing we're going to do is work our way into it like we did when we first got here and look at the edges of it, because without the sun, those fish are going to be more apt to be closer to the edge and working that open water.
Right.
You know, but when we got here, what we seen was some fish turning back here in the thicker stuff. And as we're sitting here talking, Matt, I don't know if you can turn the camera around or not and see this, but there is a little duck back there. He just went underneath the grass. They're called a grebe. And anytime you see those little grebes back there, he's back there about 200 yards. You see him, Cliff, right next to that brown, going in and out of the grass? Those grebes are fish eaters. They eat little shad.
Right.
So that's an area where you see those grebes working like that, especially if you see a flock of them, you know, 5, 6 of them together working. That's an area where you know the bait fish are. Where you got bait fish, that's where your big fish are going to be.
Right.
That's where your predator fish are.
So you're going to basically work
So
back in that area.
I'm going to keep an eye. I'm going to keep an eye on that area, see if we see any blow-ups back in there. But that's part of it right there. And you know, a lot of guys, they'll get so focused on watching their frog, waiting for that blow-up. You're going to hear that blow-up. You're going to feel that blow-up when they get it.
Right.
When you're reeling back in and you're working your frog, once you get down how you want to work it and get to a rhythm, keep looking at the horizon out there. Look across that grass and see and watch where these fish are. They'll tell you where they're at.
Right.
Like right
Like
behind
that
us.
one right
Like
there.
Right there. Okay, imagine that.
Yeah. That's what you listen for.
Come on.
But the one advantage of taking a guide like a man like Jake Davis is him scanning. That's his job. Your job, my job is just cast it out there and just wait on that blow up.